Montana Territory. August of 1877, the sky was burned gold and copper when Caroline Traynor stepped out of the mercantile with her chin raised too high. The strike came hard and fast. A backhand across her cheek, ringing through the dry heat like a shot. She did not cry out. She had learned not to. "You think wearing boots makes you a man," her husband hissed low, too close to her face. "You think just because I am gone 3 days you can walk about town alone." Caroline stood still, the edge of her shawl slipping from her shoulder. Around them, folks pretended not to see except the tall cowboy by the water trough. He had been filling his canteen, arms bare under the rolled sleeves of his shirt, dust on his boots. His hat shaded his eyes, but not his jaw clenched tight. "Leave it," someone muttered near him. "It ain't your business." But the cowboy stood, straightened slow, and walked toward them. Caroline's husband turned. "You got something to say?" The cowboy's voice was steady and low. "Yeah, I do." He looked at Caroline, then at the man gripping her arm. "She stepped out of line?" the cowboy asked. "She's my wife." "I did not ask that," the cowboy replied. "I asked if stepping out of line means you get to hit her." Caroline's husband sneered. "She needed reminding." The cowboy nodded once. "Then I'll walk out with her." The town went silent. Even the horses stilled. Caroline blinked. "You do not have to." "I do," the cowboy said. "Name's Nolan Grady." He looked her husband in the eye. "And I am taking her with me." Her husband lunged, but Nalin moved quicker, grabbed the man's wrist and twisted until he dropped his hand. No gun drawn. Just strength and certainty. "Go ahead," Nalin said. "Try." Caroline's breath came shallow, her cheek still stinging, but no one else moved. Then her husband spat in the dirt and stormed off, muttering curses. Nalin turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded, though her legs were unsteady. "You just made a lot of trouble for yourself." "I can handle trouble." Caroline looked at him, then really looked. Dust on his shirt, sun in his hair, but his eyes steady and kind. "I cannot go back there," she said softly. "Then don't." He offered his hand. "Come on." She hesitated, then placed her palm in his. It was warm, steady. They walked down the street together, past the staring eyes and whispered voices. "You do this often?" she asked. "Rescue strangers?" Nalin gave a quiet laugh. "No, just you." They stopped outside the livery. His horse, a chestnut gelding, stood tethered. "I have nowhere to go," Caroline said. "No money, no family, just me." He studied her face. "I have a cabin, about a half-day's ride west. It is not much, but it is quiet, safe. You can stay there until you figure what you want." She looked at his horse, then back at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because no one else did." She did not speak for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right." They rode out of town that night, the sun dipping low behind them. Caroline rode side saddle on Nalin's horse, her arms around his waist. The wind cooled her bruised cheek. She did not cry until the lights of the town were far behind them. Nalin's cabin sat inside a bend of pine-covered hills, backed by a creek that whispered day and night. He had built it himself after leaving the cattle drives, tired of wandering, tired of killing. He brought her water to wash and blankets fresh from the line. She said little the first day. Just watched him from the porch, her hands folded tight. On the second day, she cooked beans and cornbread. He did not ask her, she simply did it. And he thanked her. On the third, she stood by the creek, her hair loose and her sleeves rolled up, and asked, "Did you ever lose someone?" Nalin looked at the water, then back at her. "My brother," he said. "War took him, Virginia." "He was 20. Caroline nodded, eyes distant. "I had a son," she said. "Paul, he would have been 7 now, died the winter before last, fever." He did not say sorry. He just stepped beside her and stood silent. They fell into rhythm, quiet mornings, simple meals, chores shared. She sewed the tear in his shirt. He mended her boot. One night after supper they sat on the porch. The moon hung low over the trees. I was not always like that, she said suddenly. Afraid. I know. He was not always cruel, not at first, her voice cracked. But once I lost Paul, I did not care what happened to me. Nalin reached over, not with words but with his hand resting it over hers. You are not there any more, he said. She looked down at their hands. I do not know what I am now. You are free. She turned her face toward him. And what if I want more than just freedom? He met her eyes. Then take it, her breath caught. Are you offering? I am. She leaned in slow. He met her halfway. It was not a kiss of passion, but of promise, of something starting. They slept in separate rooms that night. But before she closed her door, she looked back at him. Thank you, she said. He nodded. Get some rest. She did, for the first time in years. By the fifth morning, Caroline had taken to carrying a basket down to the creek, not for any real need, but because the movement gave her something to do. Nalin was out by the fence line, replacing a split rail she'd heard him curse over the day before. She glanced toward him once, saw the way he leaned into his work, the line of his back taut beneath his shirt. The days were warm still, but the light had begun to thin, the way it did toward late August in the high country. A change was coming, small but sure. That night, while she shelled beans by the hearth, she cleared her throat. You built this place alone. Nalin nodded from the table where he was oiling his saddle. Took me 2 summers. Hauled timber from the ridge, dug the well myself. She watched his hands move with slow precision. You ever think of leaving it? He set the cloth down. No. Why? Because I've seen enough of what's out there. I'd rather listen to the creek than men shouting in saloons. She folded another husk into the basket. I used to think quiet meant loneliness. He didn't look up. And now, I think maybe it means peace, if you let it. He gave a low hum in agreement. The next afternoon, while Nalin tended to the forge beside the barn, Caroline took a walk along the ridge behind the cabin. The air smelled of pine resin and sun-warmed earth. Her apron caught the breeze, and for a moment she let herself spin in it, just once, her arms loose at her sides. She hadn't moved like that in years. When she came back down, Nalin was setting a kettle over the fire pit beside the porch. He looked up, brow lifted slightly. You all right? I think so, she said. I found a clearing up there. Feels like no one's ever stood in it. He nodded toward the tin cups on the bench. Sit. It's sassafras. She sat across from him and took the warm cup in both hands. What made you come to Montana? She asked. Was heading north after a job in Cheyenne. Got caught in a storm near Gallatin. A trapper let me wait it out. Told me about the land west of the river. Seemed like as good a place as any. She traced the rim of her cup. My husband brought me here from Kansas. Said there'd be opportunity. Turned out he meant for himself. Nalin didn't speak, but she felt him listening. I used to sew for the neighbor women. Kept some coin in a jar under the floorboard. He found it one day and poured it in the stove. He looked at her, his jaw working slightly. You can sew here. There's a table by the window. Gets good light. She blinked, then gave a small nod. I'd like that. The next morning she found a stack of folded muslin left beside her plate. No note, just the fabric, clean and pressed. She touched it once before picking it up. They fell into a new rhythm. She mended shirts and stitched simple cloth bags for trade. He brought her scraps of calico from a wagon he passed on his way back from the mill. They didn't speak of the past, not anymore. They spoke of the weather, the land, the hawk that circled above the cabin every morning. One night, as the wind picked up and the shutters clicked against the walls, he lingered by the hearth after she had risen to go. Caroline, she turned. Yes, you don't have to stay just because I offered it. You know that, right? She stepped closer, the fire catching in her hair. I'm not staying because I must, she said. I'm staying because I want to, he breathed out slow. All right. She reached out and took his hand, not tentative, not unsure. I'm not afraid of quiet anymore, she said. He looked down at their joined hands. Neither am I. They stood like that a long time, the fire snapping low beside them, the wind softening just enough for the stillness to settle in. Nalin's hands were stained with iron dust when Caroline came out of the cabin with a folded cloth wrapped around fresh bread. The forge had cooled, but the smell of smoke clung to him. She held the bundle out. You haven't eaten since before sunup. He took it with a nod, wiping his palms on his trousers before unwrapping it. Thank you. Caroline leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the light fade behind the trees. The hills caught the gold first, then let it go without ceremony. She turned to him. Do you ever miss company? More than just one voice around, Nalin chewed slowly, then swallowed. Sometimes, but I never liked crowds. They pull things out of a man, make him mean or louder than he ought to be. She gave a small nod. Back home, every Sunday was noise. Women talking over each other, boys pulling at skirts, the preacher never loud enough to be heard over the baby cries. She smiled faintly. I used to want hush more than anything. He handed back the empty cloth. You've got it now. Caroline tucked the linen under her arm. Sometimes I wonder if I waited too long to want different. Nalin's gaze didn't leave hers. You didn't. She didn't answer, just stepped back inside. He followed after a moment, letting the screen door close behind him. Inside, the cabin held the scent of dried lavender and warm pine. She moved toward the shelf by the hearth and ran a fingertip over the edge of a tin box, then opened it. I've been thinking of selling these, she said, lifting out a small bundle of stitched sachets. Not much, just something to earn. Nalin set his hat on the hook by the door. You don't need my say-so. I know, she said, her tone quiet, but I'd like it. He took one of the sachets from her hand, turning it gently. My mother kept one of these in her trunk, smelled like her long after she passed. Caroline's fingers brushed the inside of the box. I made them before Paul got sick. Folks said they helped with sleep. Nalin returned the sachet to her hand. They'd sell fine in town, probably better than my hinges. She looked up at him, eyes soft. Would you take me there? He nodded once. We'll go when the weather holds. She let out a small breath, almost a laugh. I'd like that. That night, she mended a tear in his coat while he watched the fire curl low. The silence between them wasn't empty, it moved like a current, slow and sure. After a while, Caroline said, You're not what I expected. Nalin tilted his head. How's that? You carry quiet like it's armor, but you listen like it's prayer. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You've still got places inside you no one's touched in years. I see that. She set the needle down. And if I let them be touched again, he met her eyes, then I'd be careful, not because I pity you, but because I want to be the one who's gentle. She stood, walked to him, and knelt at his feet. I'm not asking for promises, she said. Just a place to start. He reached out, brushing her hair behind her ear, slow and reverent. This is that place. She leaned into him, her cheek resting against his knee, and for a long while neither moved. Outside, the wind shifted through the trees and the cabin held them in its quiet heart. The wagon wheels creaked steady over the rutted trail. Pine needles crushed under the horses' hooves as Nalin guided them west. Caroline sat beside him, her hands folded atop a small crate of lavender sachets wrapped in muslin. The town of Red Lodge lay ahead, tucked low between the foothills. No more than a few dozen buildings and a single church steeple poking above the cottonwoods. She hadn't asked questions when he hitched the team that morning, just tied her hair back, laced her boots, and climbed up beside him. He didn't offer explanations, only handed her a wool shawl for the ride and a tin canteen before they set off. They passed a cluster of grazing cattle and a boy waving from the ridge. Caroline raised a hand in return, quiet but certain. You ever think about starting up something of your own? Nalin asked without turning his head. Caroline's brow furrowed. Like a shop. Maybe not in town. But folks talk about wanting things they can't find here. Stitched goods, herbs, soft linens. I don't have coin to buy bolts of fabric, he nodded. I wasn't saying now, just someday. She looked down at the soft bundle in her lap. I never let myself think past the next day. Not for years. Well, he said, you've got more than days now. They rode on in silence for a time. At the edge of town, Caroline's breath caught as they passed the churchyard fence. A woman stood by a grave, her hat held tight in her hands. Caroline turned her face away, the sight too close to something she didn't want to name. Nalin slowed the horses near the general store. We'll trade here first, then the post. You all right waiting, or? I'll come in, she said. Her voice didn't waver. Inside, the store smelled of kerosene and dried tobacco. Shelves lined with tin goods and bolts of rough cloth. The shopkeeper, a graying man with a crooked hand, looked up from his ledger. Grady, he said. Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Nalin gestured to Caroline. She's got something to trade. The man's eyes flicked toward her, then down at the bundle she unwrapped. His expression shifted when he caught the scent. Lavender and mint, she added. I grow both. He picked up one sachet, sniffed, then nodded. Could sell these easy. Travelers like something clean to tuck in their saddle packs. Caroline glanced at Nalin before answering. Would you take them in trade for muslin? Just enough to make more. I'll give you 6 yards, that's fair. She nodded. Thank you. Outside, Nalin helped her load the fabric into the wagon bed. Her fingers lingered on the weave. I haven't bartered since Kansas. Forgot what it felt like to be treated decent. You earned it, he said. They passed the post office and the smithy before heading home. Nalin didn't speak until the trees swallowed them whole again. You ever think about marrying again? Caroline didn't answer at first. The air in the pines was cooler now, the wind carrying the promise of autumn. I used to think marriage was a kind of trap. A place a woman gets put and left to rust. And now, I think, if a man sees you as whole, not a burden or a possession, it might be something else. He nodded slowly. I'd never put you in a place you couldn't walk out of. I know. They reached the cabin by dusk. The chickens clucked low and the creek murmured beside the porch. Caroline climbed down from the wagon and turned to him, the muslin tucked beneath her arm. I want to build something here, not just stay. I want that too, he said. She stepped close. Will you come inside? He didn't ask what she meant, just followed. Inside, she lit the oil lamp, the warm glow softening the lines of her face. She set the fabric aside and turned to him. I'm not afraid anymore. You don't have to explain. I'm not, I'm choosing. He stepped to her. So am I. Their hands found each other, first calloused, familiar. Then her mouth met his, not tentative but sure. The kiss was quiet, but it held everything they hadn't spoken. That night they didn't sleep apart. There was no ceremony, no vows. Just 2 people who had seen enough of the world to recognize something worth holding. By morning, the light through the window fell across the muslin on the table and the imprint of her hand on his chest. And Nalin knew. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. By late September, the trees had begun to turn. Fire-colored leaves danced along the edge of the creek, and the mornings came with a bite that made Caroline pull her shawl tighter around her shoulders while she boiled water for coffee. Nalin had risen early, as he always did, splitting wood behind the barn before the sun cleared the ridge. She watched him from the kitchen window, the horizon behind him pale and streaked with frost. She'd grown used to the rhythm of their days, not just the work, but the way they moved around each other, easy and unspoken. His presence no longer startled her. It grounded her. And more, She found herself reaching for it, his hand on her lower back as she passed him the kettle, the way his gaze lingered when she looked up from her stitching. That morning, Nalin came in with a handkerchief tied around something small. He set it on the table and loosened the knot while she poured his coffee. "Found this in the ravine near the stone outcrop," he said, unwrapping a delicate bird's nest, empty now but perfectly woven. She bent to look. "It's so fine, like it was sewn with thread. Thought you'd appreciate the workmanship." She touched the edge of the nest gently. "Even the smallest things make a place for themselves." He sipped his coffee. "That they do." Later, she took the nest and placed it on the shelf beside the tin box that held her sewing tools. She didn't say anything, but her fingers lingered there a moment longer than they needed to. That afternoon, she began converting the small lean-to beside the cabin into a workspace. Nalin helped her clean it out, brushing away cobwebs and hauling out old feed sacks. She swept the floorboards clean, then nailed muslin across the single window to soften the light. By sundown, she had her sewing table in place, and a small oil lamp Nalin had found at a trading post flickered over her work. He leaned against the doorframe as she arranged her bundles of fabric. "You planning on taking orders next?" "I might," she said without looking up. "There's a woman in town who asked if I could make her a set of linens. Said nothing store-bought ever fits right. Charge what it's worth." "I intend to." He folded his arms. "You ever think about what comes next for us?" She turned then. "I have. And I want to stay, not just sleep here. I want to belong here." He stepped inside, quiet on the worn floorboards. "You already do, I mean with you," she said, fully. He reached for her hand and held it there between them. "I asked you once if you wanted more than freedom. You said you did." "I still do." He let out a slow breath. "Then I'll ask proper if you'll have me." She smiled, eyes shining in the lamplight. "Yes, Nolan Grady, I will." They were married under the cottonwoods behind the cabin a week later. Reverend Beale rode out from Red Lodge, and 2 ranch hands from Nalin's former cattle outfit stood witness. Caroline wore a simple blue dress she'd sewn herself, and Nalin shaved for the first time in weeks, though he left the sides of his beard untouched. They exchanged their vows without fanfare, hands clasped, voices steady. Nalin slipped a plain gold band onto her finger, one he'd bartered for with a set of hand-forged hinges. Afterward, they served biscuits and dried apple pie, and the Reverend blessed the land and the home they'd made. As the others rode off toward dusk, Nalin and Caroline remained beneath the trees. She rested her head on his shoulder and he wrapped an arm around her waist. "You ready for quiet again?" he asked. "Not just quiet. I'm ready for peace." That night, she laid her wedding band beside the bird's nest on the shelf, then turned back toward their bed. Nalin was already there, watching her with a look she hadn't seen on any man's face before, not hunger or claim, but reverence. She slipped beside him and he pulled the quilt over their shoulders. "Home," she whispered. He kissed her temple. "Ours." 4 years later, the cabin had grown. A back room had been added, and the lean-to had become a full workshop where Caroline took orders from nearby ranches and farms. Her linens and sachets traveled as far as Bozeman by wagon, each one stitched with a small pine needle emblem at the corner, a symbol of where she'd found new life. Nalin built a second barn behind the first, and when a neighbor's orphaned colt needed tending, he brought it home and they raised it together. In the evenings, they sat on the porch with their hands entwined, listening to the wind move through the trees. They never left the land, never wanted to. And though the past never vanished, it quieted, became a place they had walked through hand in hand toward something better. They grew old there, in love, undisturbed, whole.